What's up, everybody? Welcome into a Tuesday edition of Morning Cup of Hockey presented by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. So use our code NATION, NATION, in all caps. I'm with Colby Cohen. I'm Johnny Lazarus. We got a doubleheader today. We got Frank Seravalli hopping on with us to kick the show off. Then we got Ryan Whitney joining about halfway through. A lot to get into today. But there's one specific thing that we want to start with, and that is the Tampa Bay Lightning power play, which looked undefendable last night against the Toronto Maple Leafs, despite losing that game 5-3. We wanted to get right into it this morning, but Colby, just in case there is something you want to talk about before we do, let me kick it over to you. Anything you want to bring up this morning?
Well, I have to fix my tweet because I just tweeted that we had Ryan Whitney coming up and then Frank joining us at 9:30. But I guess I'm
a little scheduling issue, yeah, and people are pissing me apparently.
I'm on the wrong side of that one. But look, I do want to show that power play clip and you know, admire it almost with all of our loyal watchers and loyal listeners. But I want to praise the Toronto Maple Leafs for the way that they played yesterday. I mean, it's one of my favorite things to do is to give Vic a hard time about the Maple Leafs, even though I watch them probably as much as I watch anybody. I think with the Rangers kind of skid this year, I've sort of shifted into a lot of those windows. I feel like I watch Toronto this year because when Toronto's firing on all cylinders, they're entertaining. Mm-hmm. And I say this all the time. I mean, you know, try to get viewings on all the different teams throughout the course of a month, just so you have a little bit of a background, you know, on each team. But other than that, you know, some nights you just want to be entertained, and Toronto, when they're going, they're entertaining, and you know, they seem like when they dial it up, they're hard to beat. I mean, you look at the way that they played yesterday, and you look at you know, some of the little things that stood out to me. Like, we've criticized the defensive group for Toronto for quite some years, right? We've criticized the goaltending for quite some years. And I mean, I watched that Toronto Maple Leaf team play yesterday, and their defense, they don't give up the blue line. I mean, the gap control through the neutral zone, it's really impressive. Now, that comes from great back pressure. And that's kind of where I really, what I wanted to point out is you can make your defensive core go from being good to really good, or really good to almost great, if forwards are so committed to back pressure, because, you know, it gives defensemen so much more confidence to hold the blue line, to make contact somewhere in the neutral zone, forcing other teams to dump pucks. And then they're mobile enough to get back and you know, with the skill group of their forwards, like breakouts and getting back and coming out clean is pretty easy for Toronto, right? So I think that I would call Toronto and Tampa Bay a rivalry at this point.
Yeah, for 1,000%.
You know, I think those two teams get together and like there's extra piss and vinegar. Guys play a little bit choppier, guys play a little bit heavier. And I was entertained by that game. I thought it ebbed and flowed. I thought Toronto came out and looked like the better team early. And then I think Tampa in the second period pushed quite a bit. But, you know, Toronto kind of bent without breaking until Nylander gets that goal, which didn't come long after a pretty big shot block by Bobby McMahon on Victor Hedman, which, you know, doesn't feel good, burying that one right off of his laces. You know, but I will say, like, I was impressed with just the details of the back pressure. And again, like the end of the game, Mitch Marner's on the ice, right? Like the end of the game, you need to kill plays like Austin Matthews on the ice, you know, and these are good things. And I know you've seen these things in the past out of this team. But I just think when Toronto plays at the top of their game, and they get goaltending, which again, always going to be talked about until they can get through the playoffs and become unscathed with that, and they can stay healthy. You know, Stolarz was a great 1-2 punch when he was healthy. and kind of waiting to see what happens there. But it was an entertaining game. I was very entertained by that hockey game.
Let me ask you this too, because sometimes the way that they play, or at least how hard they play, could be unsustainable. And we were talking with Vic this morning, and Vic was saying like the back pressure isn't always there. And is that something like when a team like that, let's say there's a game where they look like they're all over the ice, they're flying, they're above the puck the entire game, and then the next night they struggle to do that. That's not necessarily an attention to detail thing, is it? Or is it just hard to sustain that kind of pressure for 82 games throughout the year?
Not really. Back pressure is not something that's not sustainable. I think back pressure is just a mentality, in my opinion. There are teams that back pressure for 82 games. I mean, you're going to have a shift here and there maybe, but look, the Toronto spends a lot of money on their forward group.
Yeah.
No secret. So you don't have a bunch of Norris Trophy. You don't have Vegas's back end. You don't have 3 or 4 of those guys. You have a bunch of guys who are now sort of blue collar, hard and heavier, two-way types of defensemen, which is kind of how I would describe Jake McCabe, right? Very, very hard-nosed, but two-way guy. Jake McCabe can make a first pass. Jake McCabe can look off his first pass and hit that second option. They have the guys to do it. Look, the team that wins the Stanley Cup every year is usually the team that has heavy skill, back pressures, right? And just makes the neutral zone miserable because of the way that their defensemen hold up and because the way that their defensemen don't give off the blue line and don't give up free offensive zone possession time. And part of that is because the forwards, the minute they lose the puck, F3 doesn't just dive in on a fool's errand. F3 is always responsible and above the puck, meaning when I say above the puck, closer to their own goal than the offensive team's goal, above the puck. I know we're talking offensive zone, but that's where it applies. And those are usually a couple of habits that are consistent with every team that wins the Stanley Cup every single year.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And let's go into the flip side quick, just before we bring Frank onto the show. We saw this power play goal last night by the Tampa Bay Lightning against the Toronto Maple Leafs PK. And, we're trying to look at it, trying to pick out the mistakes here that Toronto could have made or what they could have done better. And both you and I are sitting there, even Vic too, and we're like, this just looks undefendable. I don't know what you can do differently to stop this play. I mean, the passing here from Hagel to Hedman to Kucherov. Colby, if you want to break this one down, I mean, this was just a beautiful power play goal by Tampa last night.
Yeah, well, look, you move Cooch to, he ends up on his strong side in that downhill position, which has just become extremely trendy in the National Hockey League. Look, the team that I coach, both of our flanks play downhill. I think the art of the one-timer has kind of faded out of the game of hockey. I mean, there are still guys who do it, but this new generation of hockey player all play with a much whippier stick. They all play with 80 flex.
It's a really good point, actually.
They all play with 76, 80, 82 flex, maybe 85. Gone are the days of a lot of guys playing with 100 flex. I'm talking about the new guys, right? I'm not talking about Victor Hedman. I'm not talking about those guys are probably playing with heavier flex sticks, right?
Like Jack Hughes, Zegras, Caulfield.
Right. So those guys, it's very difficult to one-time a puck when your stick is that whippy. It's really, really difficult. You can shoot it, but it's hard to one-time it. But look, Cooch starts moving downhill, and right now, what you witness here is 4 guys, sort of get staring a little bit at the puck. Like normally, I'd say you can't puck watch, but look, Kucherov moving downhill. 1 or 2 guys probably need to focus on him, and then 1 or 2 guys probably need to think who's the next most dangerous guy on the ice. The problem here is Victor Hedman has a big one-timer. He does. He's got a heavy one-timer. And the problem also is Brandon Hagel's on a one-timer side, and we're about to see that he's comfortable one-timing a puck. But to me, like, you attack the box if you're Kucherov, you break it with a behind-the-back pass, and then you have 2 guys in a row that one-touch the puck, right? Hedman's pass is a one-touch. then Hagel's pass is a one-touch. I mean, it's undefendable, right? I do think Matthews probably can recover back to the top of the net front there, so McCabe can come out a little bit faster. But you got to worry about Cirelli, and you don't get lucky with a block. I mean, it's sometimes, and I'm stealing this quote from Bruce Cassidy from all the years I've played for him. Sometimes you tip your cap to the other team. They just make a play, right? And while not perfect, it's difficult to defend 2 one-touch passes with one being a shot pass on top of the crease. I mean, very difficult. And so that's what Tampa can do. And look, it kept them in the game last night.
I'm also surprised that behind the back pass isn't more popular in the NHL, because I see it a lot in college. It was really popular with the teams that I played against. I feel like in my first couple of years playing NCAA, and maybe NHL PKers are just smart enough to keep their stick in that passing lane, and maybe that's why it's not as popular. I don't know. Have you seen it a lot at the junior level?
Well, look, it's funny because it's something we actually work on. And we've executed it at times and not executed it at times. Especially because we have downhill flanks on our team.
We did it a lot in Mercyhurst. That was like our go-to option.
I would, and I'm not saying this to be combative towards you, but I do see it quite often in the National Hockey League.
You do.
I don't agree.
Combative.
Yeah, I don't agree with that sentiment. I think a lot of teams that have those big downhill presence use that.
I think Vancouver is one of them. I see Vancouver do it.
Well, because they have guys that are rolling down on their, personally, when you can have one guy going downhill and one guy on an offside for a one-timer, I think that's really hard to defend. I think in a perfect world, to have a hammer on one flank and have a guy who can go downhill and who can really make plays, like, to me, that's the dream for a power play. And you see it a lot because a lot of teams just have a lot of lefties. Like even our team that I coach, the junior team, it's like we have a lot of left shots on our power play. I think we have 1 righty and 4 lefties on our power play. It's not ideal. You'd love to have another righty. But for whatever reason, there's just more lefties, especially on the back end.
And it's okay. You can be combative. We're all used to it if you wanted to. So
but I'm just saying, I truly disagree with that. With that. So, all right, let's bring Frank in. He just joined into the stream.
And Frank, I apologize for the scheduling stuff this morning. And thank you.
You should.
You should. Thank you for.
I agree. You should. When people have kids,
I am apologizing.
You should.
It's all good.
I really am.
How you doing this morning, Frank?
I am super.
Can you feel your toes yet from being out at Lincoln Financial Field all night on Sunday night, or it was all well worth it?
It was worth it. That was one. It wasn't that cold. It was, for our Canadian listeners, it was like -1 or 2. The wind was legit though. That was like 30 miles an hour. So that made it a lot colder. The cold, I was fine. My son was fine, but we were just on the outer edge of an overhang and we were getting dripped on all game. Like not like little drips, like massive drips. And so we were just soaking wet. That's the part that sucked.
Yeah. Let me just before we go into your questions, Frank, there is a question in the chat about what we were just talking about. From Carousel Vertigo said, going downhill, what does that mean? So it's a good question because I'm talking about it, and like some people probably understand it, some people don't. So going downhill means when you see, I'll use an example. Think of the way Jack Hughes plays on the power play. He's on his strong side. He comes up to the blue line. He gets the pass from the top guy, and he's moving on his forehand side downhill towards the net. When you're on that offside flank, you're in a one-timer. You don't really refer to that as moving downhill. But Jack Hughes is a great example of it. JT Miller does it a lot in Vancouver, like Johnny just pointed out.
I think about that term like a running, like not to use a football reference, but like a running back hitting a wide open hole. After that, you're kind of gone. And that's the idea of running downhill. Am I right?
To me, the whole point of it too, though, is when you're on your forehand side, you can make yourself more of a passing target as opposed to being on your offside. It's harder to come up to the blue and catch that pass on your backhand. Like good players are good enough to catch it on their backhand, but it's hard to then get it over to your forehand and make a play. When you catch it on your forehand on the strong side, you're already basically facing up ice and you can make that pass to the goal line or let it rip. Like there's so many more options, I feel like, when you come up on your forehand to go downhill as opposed to being on your offside flank. Like that's why I think it's so popular now, because it allows you to have more options as opposed to being that one-timer option where you're just stuck basically throwing it at the net for the most part.
Yeah. I don't know. I liked being on the offside, Johnny, because your body's open. Instead, your on the strong side, your shoulders are closed. I think when you're on your offside, your shoulders are open, so you have way more ability to see everything. So, all right, we don't need to waste Frank's time with this because there are a couple of teams that I do really want to ask him about. I'd like to start with the Pittsburgh Penguins and the reports that have come out over the last, let's call it 48 hours, about a potential fire sale. I've heard very differently, and I'm certainly not an insider. And I certainly don't have the level of information that you get, Frank, but I'm just curious, like, what is the validity to these reports about a quote unquote fire sale full of big names even?
I guess someone would have to demonstrate a want for these big names. Like we're obviously not talking about Sidney Crosby, who signed an extension. I don't think Chris Letang's contract is tradable. I'd be shocked if Evgeny Malkin is on his way out, knowing that Sid's still there, given how close those two are. So that leaves what? Erik Karlsson? Like, let's walk through this in a process of elimination. Is someone signing up for Erik Karlsson? No. He can only be retained half now because he's already had one retainment in San Jose. And I don't know that even at half, he presents significant value for a team, given his liabilities in the defensive end, that make you want to go sign up for that term, let alone give something up to get it. Like, you'd have to really incentivize the Pittsburgh Penguins to have $5 million chewed up on their cap for the next few years in order to move off of him. So you're going to give up legit assets and the term for what? I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying that once you get outside of a very select few players in Pittsburgh, there really isn't a whole ton of value there to mine for teams on the market. There's a reason why this team is potentially trending toward a second to last or last place finish in their division.
So what would be the reason to leak information like that then? Like, what does that do? Does that show the
you're
fan
also
base
assuming that the information is correct.
Right.
Didn't they also say earlier in the year, like, everyone's up for grabs but Sid? Wasn't that a thing back in like October?
I guess, like, let me just get back to the original question I would ask is someone beating down the door to get these players? I don't think that's the case. And so I think when you're talking about the Penguins and other potential players on the move, Marcus Pettersson, maybe Drew O'Connor, I think even Brian Rust and Ricard Raquel have too much term. Like, I'm just not seeing the value proposition for other teams to go out and pluck players from the Pittsburgh Penguins roster.
Yeah. And Frank, it's been a while since I've asked you about the goalie market, but Colby and I have been praising Mackenzie Blackwood mainly because Vic said it was a dumb contract. But looking at,
I still think the jury's out on that, by the way. I think it probably is a dumb contract, but go ahead.
Really?
Yeah.
No, I think he's been unbelievable for Colorado since being there, and getting him at what, 5.25 was the deal for 5 years?
Yeah, but the deal didn't start yet. And ask all the other teams that have signed goalies in that range, that 5-year, that midterm range, and the midterm money. To me, the way I look at goaltending is really simple. Either you're going out and you're getting one of the top tier guys, one of the 5 to 7 guys that you can lay your head on the pillow comfortably at night and not think about, Hellebuck, Shesterkin, like that group of guys, or you're going pure value. The middle ground is where you get murdered. Jack Campbell, Tristan Jarry. I'm going to preemptively throw Joey Decourt in there. Philip Grubauer. Now add in Mackenzie Blackwood. It's possible that one or two of those guys goes the other direction and turns it into a real value proposition. But to commit that term, here's my biggest issue with the contract is, yeah, it's great that the Colorado Avalanche locked up Mackenzie Blackwood. The problem is, had Blackwood finished out this season on the exact pace that he is now, let's say he plays this well all the way through, how much more was it going to cost them than $25 million?
Yeah, but I
waited and saw how the last bit finishes off. No problem giving Mackenzie Blackwood 2 years times 5.25. How they ended up going from 2 years to 5 years is a mystery to me.
No, and I also think, though, you traded for the guy. You're looking for cost certainty. You're trying to get other guys signed. Not to mention, $5 million is going to be less than 5% of the cap.
I don't care.
Very, very soon. You can not care all you want, but I'm telling you, this is what the thought process was.
Okay, so, but how about all the other guys you could get for 3.5, 2.5 that can give you largely, like, do you know that the last 3 years prior to this one, Mackenzie Blackwood had an .888 save percentage?
We've looked into the numbers. We've looked into the teams he played for. We looked at the way he was constantly under fire. Listen, there's none of that is it's all good information. It's all fair information. But when you look at the situation and the fit, I think when you look at where the cap is going, you're going to have a starting goaltender playing for you for probably 3 of the 5 years of the contract, costing you 4% of your cap. And to me, maybe even less than 4%.
That's if he's starting for them. 5. You're missing the key point.
But if he's not starting, for them in years, let's call it 4 and 5, and he's costing you 3% of the cap, I think you can still find a way to make that work.
But what made you offer this deal? Nothing.
You traded for him and you wanted to lock him up because you don't want to let this thing go to a point where he could play really well and he could go to market and get a big deal.
It was never going to cost more than it cost right now. Never.
You can't predict that. That's not, I mean, like, that's your opinion. That's not fact. That's just your opinion. So
just name for me the teams that have spent money on goalies that have done it wisely.
It's not looking good.
Right now, the Rangers aren't even sure that they should have spent all that money on Igor Shesterkin. I mean, the
Islanders too.
Yeah. So we'll see how it plays out. But I don't think it's a bad move whatsoever. I think it's the right move.
Okay.
Well, my question really was, who's the next team looking for a goalie?
There's only one, I think.
Yeah. Carolina still?
And they're lowercase looking. Freddie Anderson's back and coming off of a knee surgery, not the blood clotting issue that he had the previous time around. They knew that was a defined window for him to come back. They feel real comfortable with Dustin Tokarski and the role that he stepped into. They have Kochetkov. What was a need, I think the Hurricanes looked around in the market and found out, oh, wait, we're looking for like a tandem guy, and teams are asking starter prices for backups that may or may not be impact pieces for us. The Hurricanes have never spent money or assets on goaltending because they probably subscribe to a lot of the theory that I was just talking about. And now they think they can get a reasonable enough, fashion of goaltending from Anderson and that trio to carry them. I'm not saying they're right or wrong. I'm just saying that's their thought process. So if they are going to be a buyer on the goalie market, it's probably going to be for peanuts. And beyond that, I think they're looking at it saying we have the ability to maybe make one move at this trade deadline period. Do we need a skilled forward to add, or do we really need the goalie? I think that's the question they're asking themselves right now.
What do you think? Probably the skilled forward, right?
That's what I would lean toward, just because I mean, obviously, like anyone else, I see Freddie Anderson's injury history and it's ugly. And it doesn't make me feel confident that when I need him the most, he's going to be standing tall. That said, when he has been in, his numbers have been mostly lights out, like as good as anyone else, and for very little money. So I would think long and hard about maybe going out to get a skilled forward that Rod Brindamore could utilize.
Well, staying on the theme of goaltenders, Frank, what's the deal with John Gibson? Why why is this guy still on the Anaheim Ducks? I mean, I've been not understanding this for a couple of years now. And now that Fowler has been traded, I thought like that would be the domino that, pushed them to do a deal for Gibson. And I know he's got, after this year, 2 more years at 6.4. He's got modified no trade protection. So he has, some control as to where he goes. Although I don't know the exact, it looks like he has a 10-team no trade list. So there's some flexibility there. There's plenty of teams you could go to, but do you expect him to finish the year with the Anaheim Ducks? What's your thought there?
I do, because let's go back to the previous question, which is the goalie market isn't very big.
Right.
So you've got Dan Vladar. Depends on what Utah does. What happens with Karel Vejmelka? Is Utah in the mix? Both of their goalies, Vejmelka and Ingram, both need new deals. You've got Gibson. You've got who's in San Jose? Capo Kakinen. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Still there?
And Georgiev.
And you've got way more goalies available than teams needing them at this juncture. So what that means is Anaheim asking a high price for Gibson, which is what's been reported, and the contract and term remaining, doesn't really matter that he might be the best goalie available. The issue is no one's going to pay a premium to get a guy that is already the second best goalie on his team and has that kind of contract remaining because of what we just talked about. You're either paying the elite or you're paying next to nothing.
Mm-hmm.
There's very little middle ground, and Gibson's caught in that middle. And not only that, but look at the last 2 years prior to this one. I know his numbers have been way better this year, but 100 games played, it's 99 at an .894 save percentage. I know there's team effects in front of him, but it's
real
not just
team
that.
effects.
Yeah, it's team effects, it's contract, it's asking price, and there's also a bit of, the book's out on John Gibson. He's been known around the league as a miserable guy. His body language, teams don't like it. So they've heard all the stories. And unless someone really gets pressed into a need where they feel like John Gibson's going to be the true difference maker, you're just as good going out to get one of the guys in San Jose, get one of the guys in Utah, get Dan Vladar, rather than pay a premium to get John Gibson and be locked into 2 more years beyond this one.
Yeah, and just to correct ourselves, I saw Joel when he's put in the chat. Kakinen's with Winnipeg. San Jose's goalies are Askarov, Georgiev, and Vanacek. Just to clarify,
Vanacek, that's the guy I meant.
Yeah, Vanacek.
Yeah, and Askarov played against Boston yesterday, and he probably a couple that he'd want back. But I still think he's legit. I mean, he looks like he's going to be a true number 1 goaltender in the National Hockey League.
Man, has any GM in the league had a better 10 months than Mike Grier? I'm not kidding. He's if you look at the positional boxes that have been checked in that organization now, Askarov in net, Sam Dickinson on the blue line, then you go up front with Celebrini in that group. Like, Mike Grier has had a banner last calendar year for the San Jose Sharks.
I just
not only that, but the coaching change, Ryan Warsofsky has obviously been a fantastic fit. They have good vibes there in San Jose, which it was, not to use a Johnny term, but like, things are looking, they have a totally different feel in San Jose.
You're catching the vibes, Frank?
I watched a good chunk of that Boston game yesterday.
Yeah.
Like, Boston had to work for it. Charlie Coyle came through with a couple of timely goals, but man, like, it didn't come easy. Not that it seems to ever come easy for Boston right now, but I would agree. I mean, I don't find myself turning on the TV to watch Chicago, but I do find myself turning on the TV to watch San Jose. Even when they're losing.
That's just a BU thing.
I mean, yeah, Celebrini's pretty fun to watch. BU or not. I mean, I like watching Will Smith too, by the way, and he's a BC guy. I mean, he had a nice goal yesterday, and you just see Will Smith sort of finding his way and kind of getting used to the National Hockey League. So, well, Frank, I don't think we intended to make our whole segment with you today about goaltenders, but I know it's our favorite subject to disagree on, you and I. It always seems to go that way. So we'll see. We'll have to, you and I'll have to come up with like a Mackenzie Blackwood wager for like a dinner at Stephen Cookie's or something here in the next couple of summers. We'll have to write that down in the little black book.
Bring your card, buddy.
Thanks,
right,
Frank. We appreciate it. And sorry again.
Yeah. See you guys.
All right, so let's get to our next guest. But before we bring him on, just want to give a quick word from our sponsor, Proraso, the most complete choice for shaving and beard care. Made in Italy since 1948, Proraso has been a staple of Italian culture and barbershops globally for 4 generations. So get 15% off at Proraso-USA.com with our promo code Hockey15 in all caps, Hockey15. Let's bring on another BU Terrier legend. Colby, I'm sure, is going to ask something about BU right off the bat. Ryan Whitney. What's going on?
What's going on, fellas? Thanks for having me on. Sorry for the time changes. Life's a little crazy over here with 3 little kids, so I apologize to Frank.
I tell Johnny all the time, Whit. I say once there's multiple kids running around the house, all bets are off.
Yeah, people who say 2 to 3 is nothing are full of. Can you swear on this? Or full of shit. Let me tell you, the 2 to 3 is no big deal. Don't worry about it. 2 to 3 is nothing. 1 to 2 is way harder. The hell are these people talking about?
That's why we're stopping at 2, Whit. And I'm glad we started with your kids, because I'll tell you what, that video of your son,
oh my God,
absolutely just using his stick as a tomahawk out there.
Tyler Myers.
It's funny though. Squanto, I had to read him the riot act after that, right? It's like, buddy, like you can't, like that. This is not a weapon. Like you got to try to get the puck. Stick stays on the ice. And since then, he's skating around like I was skating around, not going near anyone. I'm like, I don't even think I should have said anything. He had the fire in him. I screwed it up, but I did feel bad for the kids. He was slashing in the neck multiple times. And it was funny because I showed Bree the video of my wife. And when that was probably like Christmas Eve. I think it was Christmas Eve, because all of a sudden, like some people in the family, my wife has a huge family, so we're hanging out. They're like, that video is insane. And Bree's like, oh, he showed you? They're like, no, I saw it on Twitter. She's like, he wouldn't have posted that. And I was like, oh, I posted it.
I mean, so, it is hilarious.
Yeah. So he's a nut. But yeah, I got a 7-year-old. So he's a first-year mite. He just turned 7 in November. Wyatt just turned 4 in November. So I got him kind of buzzing around the ice. So it's interesting. Right back in the mix of things. It's pretty cool.
You got to do a video of them mic'd up. I love seeing the little kids. Like I've seen some goalies where they're mic'd up and they just like talk to themselves the whole game. It's like the cutest thing ever. But it's a good transition because I wanted to talk about this too. We kind of saved the McDavid suspension stuff for you. But I remember your kids what?
3 games? 3 games?
Whoa. Wait. Your kids are probably too young right now. But I remember when I was like 12, 13, watching Sid and your Penguins teams, come up, I hated Sidney Crosby. Like I hated him as a Rangers fan too, because you guys played against the Rangers like those years, 08, 09, all those years. The kids now, like, do they have any hate toward Connor McDavid? Like, he's the star of the league, just like Sid was, but people fucking hated Sid. And I don't think Connor McDavid has that at all. And maybe this might give people a reason to a little bit.
Possibly, but like, and we can get all into this because I'm glad to be here. But as a fan, you're a diehard Rangers fan. You're a kid, like you hated him. Like, did you know how good he was and respect that, or were you just like one of those fans like, he's not that good, he's overrated, I just can't stand him because he lights up my team? Like, it was
a mix of both. A mix of both. I was 12.
I know, but that's like I think of 94. I was 11. And that was, I remember, like, even though it was the Rangers run, but that's when I truly like became obsessed with hockey. I remember it. So that's the age of like you're just like dreaming of playing in the NHL and you watch the games. But I never really could imagine playing with Sid that there were people who actually hated him. Like, I could get how you can't stand how he's lighting up your team. And at the beginning of his career, maybe a little bit of embellishment, but like, as a hockey fan, even kids, I would think you'd be like, oh, he's just so good. And that's the thing with McDavid. And it probably goes into the fact that a lot of kids, and Colby, you know this from coaching, like, kids don't watch that much hockey, dude. Like, they watch clips, they watch goals, but they don't sit down and watch games. That's like, I've kind of started learning that, which is crazy. But I think back in the day, we were all like watching all these games. So maybe you learn to dislike players more. And maybe there's a 12-year-old in Calgary right now who hates McDavid, right? Because he's always dominating the Flames and the entire league. But I just can't imagine how anyone out there would hate Crosby, Kucherov, McDavid, based solely on the fact that it's so amazing to watch them. Like it's like it's a joy to watch these guys play. You're watching these guys that were just touched by God. Like it's like how are they doing this stuff? And I could see, you got a hat trick against my favorite team. God, I can't stand this guy, but you got to also respect it.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Philly where they threw snowballs and bottles at Santa Claus. So obviously, you know how they feel about Sid. But look, I can't tell you. I coach kids born 04, 05, 06, 07. They're junior A. It's the North American League. And the amount of times I'll text the Power Play group chat when there's only one game on, like a TNT game, for example. So it's not like they're watching a different game. And I'll be like, did you guys see the play that Kucherov just made or whatever? Like, let's look at that tomorrow. Nobody even writes the group chat back because I know none of them are watching it.
They're like texting on the side. They're like, Colby, shut up, buddy. Jesus,
literally,
leave me alone.
I'm sure they're like, this guy's so annoying. All he does is watch hockey. Like, it's true. It's a highlight. We live in a highlight society now. It's not a sit down, watch, and appreciate type of society. So let's get to the $1 million question though with you, Whit. What do you make of 3 games apiece between McDavid and Myers? Because I think a lot of people are pretty surprised that the same thing was given to both players.
Yeah, and I'll be open and honest. If like you're not a fan of Spittin Chiclets, I'm a very big Oilers fan. Like I really like, that's my team. Even though I quit on them last year for a little bit, but I kind of got them going. But if you're gonna sit there and try to tell me that the Myers crosscheck and the McDavid crosscheck are the same thing, you're nuts. I'll argue that to the end of time. And I haven't really seen anyone besides Canucks fans say like that it is. Like you watch both of those, it's like they're not the same thing. They're similar cross checks, but they were totally different in how they were given and what happened prior. And to me, it's like you had the blueprint for the McDavid suspension. If you wanted to go there, you had the blueprint with Matthews on Dahlin.
Yeah, that's what we said.
That was it. It was a battle. It was a hold by Dahlin. He was kind of all over Matthews. He gets up. He's pissed off. Boom. He gets him in the mouth. He gets 2 games. Now, Biz brought up this point on Spittin Chiclets that dropped today, and I couldn't agree more. The fact that those 2 teams play each other Thursday, and you could have got away with suspending each guy 1. And I'm fine with, I would have been fine with 2. I would have got 2 based solely on Matthews. And you decide to not only suspend them so they're not playing Thursday night, which we're talking about people who don't really watch games that often. Like all of a sudden Thursday night, Vancouver, Edmonton is like must watch TV. It usually is either way when those teams go at it, but you give them an extra game, but like you had a chance to give them both a game. You give them both a suspension. You got Thursday night. You got this amazing matchup. McDavid's back in the lineup, but no. And then you don't even go 2. You go 1 extra game based solely on what? Like what have we seen? We saw the Trouba slash across the face of Frederick. It was a $5,000
But that was an accident. His dick.
Oh yeah, sure, that was an accident.
Because it was a Ranger, Whit. Of course, it was an accident.
He's like talking to Pasha about the Devils. It's crazy to me. And listen, you can't cross check people in the face. That's why, like, if it was 2 games, I love Biz's idea of get them both in the lineup Thursday night in Edmonton, but it was a suspension, right? You cross check somebody in the face, you're gonna get suspended. But I just that extra game on top of the Matthews one from a couple years ago, it makes no sense. And the refs, and I like Wes McCauley and Chris Lee are 2 of the best.
I agree.
They're sitting there, and they like. I'm not gonna say they let that happen, but what are they doing?
That happen. They did.
They're trying to. They have this ridiculous comeback happening again. They're all over the zone, and a guy is laying on McDavid for 12 seconds. Like, and you can tell he's had enough. He's had enough of it.
Yeah.
I think it was a Gregor tweet. Gregor's awesome. And so he and Frank do a great show together. And it was something like, I think a few years ago, like McDavid and McKinnon drew like 150 penalties. They've drew like 30 right now. It's something crazy where all of a sudden the league just has decided not to protect its superstars, its moneymakers, the reason people watch the way other leagues have. And yeah, like you see these calls on Mahomes and you see some of this stuff and you're like, this is ridiculous. He's like diving a little bit on some of them. But what happened to a league being like, all right, we got these 10 guys, these 15 guys, like make sure you protect them. It doesn't happen. McDavid is probably sitting there like, what am I supposed to do? Like, we're trying to tie up a game, and I have a guy literally laying on me. I cannot get up, and there's no penalty called. What am I going to do? I'm going to cross-check him. Probably shouldn't have done it, but he had enough.
But it's honestly, but that's also heat of the, like, you get into the heat of the battle, and you sometimes, like, you just kind of black out a little bit, and that's the difference between, to me, that and the Myers one, which I thought was premeditated. Also, remember the Carson Soucy cross-check on McDavid was it the playoffs?
Yeah.
Like, I think the issue here is, and like, I'm not one of these people that's like fire Parros this, Parros that.
No, I love George.
Every time I've ever checked in with him or run into him and I ask him questions, like, he is a very intelligent guy. Like, he's well thought, he's intelligent, like, but I get people's frustration with inconsistency. And I think that's the hardest thing is, good job, Vic, good producing. Like, that was one game.
I know. And I think that was one game solely. Like, I do think if Soucy had done that without Zadorov
pushing
him
first,
it's different because, like, he's putting his stick where his face wouldn't have been. Soucy's putting his stick here, and with the Zadorov cross-check, the face got to where his stick was. So, like, I get that one.
Morgan Riley got 5 last year for the Ridley Gregg thing.
Yeah, I know. I know. And
the
that
inconsistency is tough.
It's the inconsistency. And, like, I'm glad you brought that up because I played with George. He's a great guy. I saw him at the Cup finals. And that job, like, you know, remember Shanahan had it. Like, everyone's all over you. Like, it's like a lose-lose. Like, I hope he makes a ton of money because it's probably like, Jesus Christ, I gotta take money out of guys' pockets, and I gotta upset fans when I'm suspending superstars. But it's just wild to me to see that if anyone were to argue like, oh, McDavid, that's ridiculous. I get it. But if McDavid looks up and Wes or Chris Lee's hands up for a penalty on Garland, he's not cross-checking him in the face. Like, it is not an excuse, but it's like you said, Cole, he's blacking out. He's like, oh, how is there no penalty? Like, you know, you're just so furious. You're trying to tie up this game late. And that's what happens. But that's the thing about the difference with Myers on Bouchard is he's standing there looking at him. Bink. There was nothing like prior, really. And,
I didn't like that play at all.
To give it the same suspension to me, if you want to give McDavid 3, give him 4.
I agree.
It should have been 2 and 3.
That's what we said, 2 and 3. We said the exact same thing yesterday. But the one positive you can look at, and we were saying this with Tyler Yaremchuk yesterday, is like at least now people can't run with that like McDavid gets played favorite all the time narrative now. Like that's dead.
No,
after he gets 3 games, right?
I think it's been dead for a while based on the amount of calls that he doesn't get. Right,
Bob Stauffer. I think the tweet you were talking about,
he was losing his mind.
Yeah, losing it. I first off, the fact that you get Stoff so regularly on your show, like he's not easy to get to come on. Like we've been trying to get Stoff to come on, and it's too early in the morning, and like, you know, but he's such a legend. But he was on fire on Twitter yesterday with his stats and his tweets. Like I'm looking forward to listening to him on your guys' show a little bit later today when I get in the car.
Oh, he dropped the heat. He dropped the heat. He does a great job. Like I think he comes on the show because Stoff and I became pretty good buddies. Like when I was in Edmonton, like he was actually very complimentary to me when things were going well, and even when I was done and couldn't move anymore. Like I think he felt for me a little bit, and I enjoyed talking hockey with him. So he comes on, but he knows a ton about the game. He's very dialed in with the Oilers, and he's just like, listen, I'm watching every game. I'm on the road with this team. Like McDavid realistically could draw 5 penalties a game. Yeah. So I get how you can't call everything on him. He's too dynamic and quick, and his hands are so good that like you're gonna miss calls on him. But to be 197th or whatever he is in penalties drawn per 60 minutes played, that is ridiculous. Like there's no other way to put it.
I think we saw yesterday it was 41st this year in the league. I
No,
think 40.
no.
Was it not? Was that not
No.
what we got yesterday?
No.
We'll have to
I
check that
try to
after.
pull that up because I believe
Vic.
Stoff.
Yeah.
This is
All right.
Bob motherfucking Stoffer we're talking
Vic will
about.
be
Yeah,
on it.
Johnny.
Vic will be on it. But again, another side of that argument, and this is like one of those silly rule change conversations, but I think it's kind of real too. And it might have been Jeff talking about it yesterday, Jeff Merrick. I forgot who exactly was saying it, and I don't want to, false credit somebody or not credit somebody. But in that little instance of the last minute of the game, Edmonton's peppering Vancouver, even if they do put the arm up to call a penalty on Garland. Is Edmonton really going to give up that puck and just take the 5-on-4 or 6-on-4 while they're, flying around the zone? They're piling on, Vancouver. One of those like rule changes to talk about is late in the period, late in the game. Do you let the penalty, if they do call one, play out? Like, let's say there's 30 seconds left in the game, penalty is called. Do you then extend that game to the extra minute and a half to let a power play finish in a game? I know it's like one of those weird things, but I mean, think about how many guys can just maul somebody in the end of a game and take a penalty when, let's say there's 10 seconds left. You can do whatever the hell you want just to get out of the situation.
It just seems, and Merrick always has these wild rule changes. Some of them I love.
But that one I like.
The face-off one I love. I don't know if you've heard that one. That one,
No.
that one that seems a little crazy to me.
What's the face-off one?
Yeah, what's the face-off one?
That besides the first face-off of the game, and
oh yeah, I've heard him talk about
after a goal, there'll never be a neutral zone face-off again.
Where would you put it?
Offensive
zone.
Yeah,
team goes offside. Other team that was defending gets an offensive zone draw.
Yeah.
It's solely based to create more offense.
Yeah.
But like I was like, because like all these neutral zone draws, it's like, wow, I wouldn't mind if all of a sudden we had a ton more offensive zone draws.
Yeah.
So it's that's what, but I think I look at the end of the game where like that's part of like old school hockey that I enjoy. Like, yeah, like buddy, you got a 1-goal game. That's why like what Garland was doing, like I almost respect it. Like
1,000%.
First off, he's a pain in the ass to play against. He's super skilled, but he drives people crazy. On Chiclets yesterday, I compared him, and it's because he has the neck guard. He has the turtleneck neck guard now. He reminds me of Plekanec. He reminds me of Plekanec. Like the way he's skilled. He's a pain in the ass. He can dive a little bit here and there, what Plekanec was known for. But buddy, like that's kind of it. Like 30 seconds left. Like I'll try to murder a guy, and hopefully it doesn't get called. And if it does, we can hopefully get away with the final 25 seconds and win this game. So I actually like at the end of the game, it's madness. Adding time to a game seems a little crazy.
It seems a little soccery, which I never like.
Yeah, soccer, the injury time.
I'm always thrown off by that at the end of a soccer game. I'm like, when is this going to end? Like, what do you like? How do you know when you're on the field? Are they yelling to them, letting them know? Like, it's confusing to me.
Well, they add up. Like, I watch Chelsea and like, so at the say they're down or they have momentum and it's tied, and you're like, what's going to be added? Is it going to be they'll throw up like plus a number like on the sideline. Sometimes it's like plus 11. You're like, there's 11 more minutes. What? Like also, that.
Like, there's such a simple solution. Just pause the fucking clock when the guy's hurt.
Yeah, I know. I think
they just let it run. That's why they do the injury time.
That's soccer. That's why the ref is pausing it. He's just pausing it on his own little stopwatch.
Yeah, which is just when you have like zillions of people watching, you're just like this the almighty powerful man behind the curtain. So Whit, a couple more things I wanted to ask you about. Before we let you go, we can't let you go without talking about Greensboro, but that's not my first question here. I know you take your boys and you go watch BU a lot. I think I ran into you there once or twice last year. Obviously a big weekend, BU BC, but the guy I want to ask you about, because I've seen you posting about him quite often, is Cole Hudson. And I'm curious from your point of view, do you think he could be as good as Lane? Because Lane was a treat for 2 years. I mean, I realized it this weekend watching them against New Hampshire. Like the last 2 years were so spoiled watching Lane and then having Celebrini there and what they did for everybody else who played there. Cole's pretty damn good too. Like what are your thoughts on Cole?
So they're so different, right? Like very, very different players. And My thing is like you watch Lane and it's like it's the fast twitch and how quick he is. Like, were you watching the game Sunday against the Rangers, Johnny?
Yeah.
Did you see when he stripped Kreider? Like,
Mhm.
like it was a one-on-one. Colby is like he's playing this one-on-one, and Kreider kind of Gretzky turns up, and all of a sudden, like he's thinking in his mind, like, oh, I just created space. Like, no, like Hudson, he's got those first 3 steps, strips
Crazy.
him, goes down. It looked like he had a breakaway, but then he ended up curling up. Might have been tired. So like Lane has that like. It's the one. I said it's like his one-on-one skills. People were ridiculing me when I said before the season. I'm like, he might be like a top 20 like one-on-one player in the NHL his rookie year. Like if you come at him, whether he's standing still or he has speed, you're done. You're done. Like the way he has the head fakes and the movement. Cole Hudson is not like that because it doesn't seem like he has the same fast twitch muscles or quickness in his feet, but he is smooth as silk. And I watched him early at BU. He actually made a play. The whole Chiclets team was in Boston, and we watched them play. I don't remember who they were playing. I think it might have been the national program. I don't remember. But Hudson came in. He beat a guy in the neutral. He beat a guy in his own zone. Then he's wheeling through the neutral zone, little head fake. He has the same head fakes as Lane, just not the same feet. And then he comes in, and he knew he was going to get lit up. He knew he was going to get completely crushed, but he took a hit to make a play. I think Ryan Green scored. It was so nice. It was like he got lit up, but I was like, oh, this kid has balls too. Like he's willing to go to really hard areas, take an enormous hit to make a play. And I kept watching him. Head's always up, so smooth, great shot from the point, can distribute. And then the World Juniors came, and I was like, oh my God, like I think we're gonna see a very similar type. I mean, he could play next year.
Yeah,
he can play in the World Juniors next year.
I hope he stay. Like I hope he doesn't rush and he takes the Lane trip. The thing I've said about them, and I haven't seen Cole as much as I've seen Lane, because like for 2 years our kids were so young, so they go to bed at 7 o'clock, and so like we're in. So I'm gonna turn the BU game on, right? I feel like they accomplish the same thing, but the way that they get to the point of accomplishment is completely different. How they play. That's kind of been how I've processed it in my brain.
What's crazy though is like you watched Lane go in the second round of Montreal, which could turn out to be like an all-time steal when you look at that draft in 5-10 years. And then Cole comes up. He's doing the same thing offensively. His team's winning, and he goes in the second round too. It's like, did you not learn something? And I get scouts are like, oh, it's different. The foot speed isn't the same, but he ends up going in the same round. It's like you think a team maybe
higher
though. First.
Higher.
Yeah, true.
But
true.
The other thing with Cole, he was injured. He had an injury leading up to U18 Worlds. So he didn't play for like 3 months leading into U18s. And in Worlds, even though he was great, he was playing on 1 foot, and he was still their best defenseman at Worlds. Yeah. So, but I'm with you. Like, how do you make that same mistake twice? Because those kids, like, there's something in the water at that house. Because
there's another one coming. I
know Lars,
and then there's another Celebrini coming too.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
I saw his like brick tournament highlights. The little Celebrini. He looks exactly like Macklin.
Crazy. Yeah, and I was talking. Who was I talking to? It might have been Macklin before the draft. He's like, yeah, I think he kind of wants to maybe go to Shattuck and BU too. I'm like, oh, this is unbelievable. So it's pretty cool to see like the brothers at BU and Macklin getting to play with his brother last year. And Quinn Hudson's a really nice scorer. He wasn't drafted, but he'll be signed by somebody.
He'll get one.
So it's really cool to get to be in Boston and shooting. I was at the game Saturday against UNH, and it's just really fun to still like be around the program a little bit. I'm so busy, it's hard, but getting to watch what Pandolfo's done there, it's fun. And then they got BC this weekend. I'm away, which stinks, but unfortunately, they're in one against BC. Like BC's that good.
Yeah. Well, listen, they got a new goaltender, 6'5" Russian kid, second round pick by the Devils. Who's they're just waiting any day now. He's going to get cleared. Like he could be a difference maker in the second half for those guys. He really could.
Similar to Sean Horkoff's son, Will. He went to Michigan early, and he's got 5 points in 6 games, so pretty cool for him. I'm really close with Sean and the Horkoff family, so I was excited. I got to see I think his first game was at Wrigley right after the Winter Classic. They played some Big Ten games there, so it's cool if a team's able to be like, all right, well, we need some help here. We can get this kid to graduate high school early and get him in, and we saw that happen with the goalie that they brought in from the USHL at BU.
Did Harkov's son not just score like an overtime winner against Michigan State? Was that him or?
I don't know if he got the OT winner. He did score in that series. He has 2 goals and 3 assists in 6 games though, and all of a sudden, like you're like,
winning.
dude, this can only help my draft status is playing college the next few months, as opposed to not maybe playing as many minutes as he hoped with the national team.
There's a risk in that, and I give these kids credit. Like these kids now, Whit, are fearless the way that they just think like they think they're so good because they are, but they have this sort of like arrogance about them. Like I can do that. I'm good enough. Like when I was on the U18 team and we played against like BU and BC, like I was like shitting myself before the games. Like I hope they don't pull my spot after I play like shit tonight and I'm -3. Like now the kids are like, yeah, I could play on your power play right now. No big deal.
And it's a good thing because it is what I think makes these kids so good, but it also leads into like, I want this, I should have this power play, I should be able to do this. And you're like, especially when you get to the NHL, like you see some of these kids, like you even see that Nemec. And Pasha told me the quote was like totally taken out of context, where he's like, I'm the 2nd overall pick. What am I doing in the AHL? It's like, buddy, this is how life works. Your team in the NHL is very deep on D. Like there's arrogance that works both ways, but the kids now, they're so good. I was saying, my wife and she was watching the World Juniors with me. She's like, how old are these kids? I'm like 18, 19. She's like, I like, just based on her reaction, she knows nothing about hockey. I was like, it is crazy. Like these kids are so good now at such young age, and it's all what they're doing. Like all summer they're playing hockey, and there's so many bad things about it, but the skill that it's created in some of these kids is wild.
They start working out with Boyle when they're like 12 now.
I know.
It's crazy. I couldn't do a pull-up until I was 16.
Do you think a lot of it too is like the way that coaches are recruiting too, and the promises like they kind of make? Like a lot of coaches say like, well, you'll come here, you'll be first power play, you'll be first line. Like, were they telling you guys that when you guys were coming up in your recruiting pitches?
Jack Parker wasn't saying that to me, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
He was very complimentary. It was almost like, you know, they'll say some certain things to get you there. And I was going there regardless, but then you get there and it's like, hey, welcome to my world. And I think that's probably changed a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, that didn't happen to me. No one told me I'd be in their first power play or first line, but like I know other guys who were told.
Yeah. You had a buddy. You had a buddy who they said that to.
Yeah, my buddy. Exactly. Whit, I wanted to bring up something funny. I'm good friends with Chris and Kyle Shiro, and Vic, I think we have a clip pulled up here that I wanted to ask you about, if we can play that really quick.
So, Sid, if you could have 2 guys on your line that you've played with previously, who would you pick?
Anyone in the league?
Anyone in the league. Former teammate.
Kunitz and Dupuis.
So you know how much I love you and Army. I'm asking this question from a friend or 2 friends. Do you and Army think Ray Shero is an asshole?
Ray Shero is probably top 5 people I've ever met in the game of hockey.
And it's funny because
he's a great guy. Why? What were you going to say?
No, it's just, I think it's hilarious that you and Army have built such an incredible, network for yourselves and what you do in the game. And Sid, his favorite 2 line mates of all time are the 2 guys that he traded you for.
Yeah, but it's like, dude, he won 3 cups with Kunitz. It's like, and Dupuis was there in 09. And that's why Ray Shero, he was very honest. He's like, hey, because my name was out there. He's like, I'm not looking to trade you, but like there are calls, and like he was honest. That's all you really want. Like Colby will tell you, like, just be honest with me. That's why I love Berkey. Berkey's so honest with the guys that he was a GM for and working with, and that's all you want. And Ray made his team way better. It was like the Kunitz trade for me was one of the best trades in Penguins history. The guy went on to play in the Olympics, won 3 cups. Like that was an amazing deal. And I think Ray knew that like my health wasn't great, and it was an awesome move by him, and him being honest with me, and like always, whenever I run into him or I've chatted with him here and there, just a great guy. So I've always loved him. We actually have to get him on Chiclets at one point. I'd love to.
And Tommy P, in case that wasn't clear sarcasm, yes, that question was from Ray Shero's kids. Just to make that clear.
That's all you ever want, Whit, is it like, I can't tell you, when I got traded to Boston, I wish I would have kept a journal of all the meetings I had with Sweens. because honestly, when I look back at it, and look, it takes two to tango. Like, I didn't play well, but like the amount of things that I felt like were just blatant lies.
Yeah.
Like just blatantly telling me this is what you want to hear, not the truth of what we think. I mean, I seriously wish I would have documented it. And when I'm with our team now, and granted it's junior hockey, but the kids now are more empowered than ever, and they come in to have a meeting with you more than ever. I tell them, listen, you want to hear the truth because you may not like it. And I'm like, I never want to do what I felt like bothered me when I'm handling these situations. Cause like, I would have been fine just hearing, listen, you're playing poorly. You suck. You're not good enough. Like that was the truth. All of those things were true at different points in my career, but never, ever were anything even remotely close to that being said. And like, that bothered me. I just didn't, it's something, and I don't dislike the guy. Like, it was whatever, it is what it was, but I just never felt a shred of honesty coming from him in our conversations.
Yeah, that's all you need. And there were coaches, you'd get like scratched or you'd get sat and then you wouldn't hear a thing about it. And then there's coaches that are like, hey, this is what you did. This is what you didn't do. This is why you sat down. You're like, all right, at least I know going forward, like where I'm at. And like, it's stressful enough. And I think fans sometimes are like, oh, you make so much money, cut the shit with the stress. I understand it's not the same as a lot of stress people have in their lives, but it's still like your livelihood. And you just want to know where you stand. And you just want to know, like, what do I have to do to maybe get more ice time or get back in the lineup? And I bet you now in the NHL, there is a lot, the communication level is probably higher because like these kids are.
You think so?
I do. I think that these kids are a lot of these kids are so like mentally, like mental midgets at times that you almost have to be like, I got to keep this kid informed on where he's standing because we don't know what he's going to do. We don't know how miserable he might get if all of a sudden we're just not being open with him and telling him what's going on. So you see that players will tell you after, and they may be pissed off at the time, but 10 years down the road, they're like, you know what? I was being told straight up what the deal was. And like now looking back, like I'm thankful for that.
Well, let me ask you that too. Like if you were playing in today's game, I'm sure you're asked this all the time, honestly, but you're a media guy, you're around it, guys that are still playing. Like how would you have handled today's game as opposed to when you were coming up? I mean, would you have been, like the Brad Marchand type who now shows personality a little bit more and has fun with it? Or, would you kind of stay quiet and to yourself? Because you're an outspoken guy.
Yeah, I think I would have been pretty similar. Like I always thought I was like a good quote they call it. Like I was answering questions very honestly to the media. I was trying to be as well spoken as I can be. But I mean I always kind of was like maybe it was just that I like enjoyed sometimes talking to different reporters. Like I remember playing in Pittsburgh like my first or second year, and that was the first time I met Elliot Friedman. And like we had a great conversation and kind of always would catch up when I would see him in Toronto and things like that. And I don't know, maybe like respecting what those guys are doing and the job they have to do. And then, when things are going real poorly for me in Edmonton and every day they're coming in and you're just like, oh, this is tough. I don't want to talk right now. But I don't know. I think I would be pretty similar. Like I started Twitter pretty early. I remember Taylor Hall and I started on the same day. We were both injured in Edmonton. And then I was like, I was tweeting things, and I was like, whoa, this is like making noise. I might have maybe could have waited. At least I was like playing to do this, but thankfully I did because it kind of led into what I'm doing now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people want guys to be more outspoken, and they want guys to be honest, and they just want to hear like guys' thoughts on what they're really feeling about their game or about the league. And now, of course, you have people who are like chirping guys once they come out and make a statement, but it's great for the league. It's great for the game. And the more in the midst players are of not media, but like their own thoughts and their own feelings on how things are going for their game or their team's game, that's good for hockey. Like you could argue that point endlessly, but to me, it's like, how is that not going to help the game grow if fans are getting a more true in-depth analysis from the actual player?
That's where I thought even what Nemec said, being in Jersey, it's like we asked the guys to be honest.
Yep.
Now it's like we don't have to like what he said. You and I may look at that wit as and like raise our eyebrows like, wow, could you imagine having said something like that when you were 20 years old? But that's okay. Like I thought that was great. That's how the kid feels. Like,
it was in Czech. Like it was, so like, that's what Pasha was saying. Like, this was in another language and there was more to the quote.
Oh,
but you're
Pasha
right.
was defending it?
Yeah, exactly. Shocker. So,
But,
hey, this JT Miller deal, would you? So I heard it was Hedel first and Mancini. I don't know. Like, that's what I've heard.
Yeah.
That does not mean at all that's what it was. Like, would you? I'm assuming you would have loved that, right?
Yes.
And what if it was Hedel first and Schneider?
I'm also fine with that.
What about and Miller
really
too?
Like Will Borgen. I like Will Borgen a lot. I want them to hang on to him. Schneider's younger. I know that he's pretty good. He's a solid third pair defenseman right now, but he can go if we're keeping Will Borgen. I like Will Borgen's game a lot. What were you gonna say though? There's one more thing you were gonna say.
And what about Miller?
Keandre?
Yeah,
he can go too. I think the Rangers are going to figure out their blue line midsummer.
K-Andre, as Sean Avery likes to call him. K-Andre Miller. Like
Sean Avery's Mika with the dry hair is I literally laugh every single time.
Mm-hmm.
Every time.
He's unreal. I do think though, Chris Drury this summer, the Rangers will have a competitive team next year. I do believe that.
Wait, did you play with Drury at BU? Were you guys there at the same time?
No, he was before me.
You, right? Yeah.
But we played in the 2010 Olympics together. He was actually, so when did he get to BU? Like 96-ish?
Yeah.
Probably like 97. I was like 14. I remember watching him in 97 when they won it. And so he was like, Drury was kind of like my idol a little bit.
That had to be pretty cool years to be living in Boston with everything going on, like, and then to follow those legendary mid-90s teams, like that had to be pretty cool for you as a Boston kid. I can only imagine.
It was great, and that was at the time I think the only college hockey program that you could get beer at the games. So like my dad was like, this is unbelievable. But those teams were great. Yeah, that's why it was like I was going to, if I ever got offered by BU, I was going there. Like, no, they didn't even have to have me in for a visit.
I got to ask you a question too, and I don't want you to be humble at all, because I don't know if I've really talked to anyone in that experience that you had before. You were drafted before you played at BU ever, right?
No. Back then it was if you went to college, your draft year was pushed back.
So you were drafted after?
Yeah. So like if I had been playing in the OHL or the Quebec League, I would have been drafted in 2001. But because I went to college back then, the college kids year, that was like the whole draft thing. I really think the draft should be pushed back a year.
I've been saying that.
I don't know why. I don't know if it'll ever happen. And I understand that puts somebody like Celebrini or Bedard in like a tough spot. But to me, it's just like that. You're
everybody else.
You're drafting these 18-year-olds, and like people are like, it's 1 year. Well, that 1 year could be kind of a big deal, and then all of a sudden it makes college and junior even better with kids being there an extra year. So I get the arguments to both sides, but I just think it makes no sense how young these kids are.
Well, I guess let me ask you this then, though, because I was going to ask you, I thought you were similar to Kale when like Kale got drafted and then came to UMass. So like when Kale's first day on campus, we were all like, oh my God, this is like the 4th overall pick. This kid's sick. Yeah. You know, so like, did you feel that people were looking at you differently when you came back to campus after going 5th overall?
No, not really. Like we had a great team, and my sophomore year it was brutal. I felt great. I had a great summer. Kind of in my mind thinking like I'm gonna have a huge year and maybe turn pro. And Colby, when you were there, did you guys have those fall 6 a.m. workouts? Yeah, so we did that twice a week, and one
Charles
of the days
River runs, baby.
So one day we'd do that, and the other day we'd play handball, which was awesome. Like guys are running around, you'd play on Nickerson and the turf. And dude, I jumped up and came down on a guy's ankle.
No,
like just like a brutal sprained ankle, like the worst you could have. I would have been so much better off breaking it. And then I came back and I kept tweaking it. And so I had a really bad sophomore year. So it was kind of hard for me because there was like big expectations from myself and from the team. And then like by the midpoint of the year, I started playing. I'm getting like booed. I'm like, what is going on here? So, but I had a good junior year, and then I left school.
Mhm.
I see people in the chat, and also I know I've talked with Merrick about this before. Like, maybe you just have the first rounders as 18-year-olds and everybody else is a 19-year-old. I mean, I gotta think smart people could get together and figure that type of thing out. Zach Boychuk threw that in the chat as well.
That's not a bad idea.
They should move it back, but have exceptions. Maybe that's kind of how you do it. Whit, we've kept you way longer than I'm sure.
No
Johnny
worries,
asked
boys.
you. The last question that I want to ask you about is the coast, is Greensboro, the Gargoyles. Like, I have a feeling merchandise sales for that team are probably going to go way up. And I have a feeling Pink Whitney's going to be flowing through that building pretty consistently. I mean, it's got to be awesome now to be involved in an ownership group, right?
Oh, it's awesome. And Biz and I we were pretty close on a team possibly going to Colorado Springs.
Wow.
And then the Avs would have their team, and then what is it? The Eagles are in the AHL, and then they'd have Colorado Springs for the coast, and it kind of fell apart. But once we went to Orlando, I believe our first time was 3 years ago for a Solar Bears game. It was Pink Whitney night where they wore Pink Whitney jerseys, and Orlando's a great place to play. Like they have a sick setup, the guys there, but like it was awesome. And Biz and I were talking about somehow being a part of it, and then the Colorado thing fell through, and then all of a sudden we heard about this opportunity with Greensboro, and I was like, I'm in. Like whatever, I really want to do this. And then, like, not even knowing what the name would be, I think they crushed it with that. I saw 4 possible different jerseys. One is whatever. There's 3 that are sick, like really cool logo, great color scheme. I think people in Greensboro are starving for it. They've had hockey before. And I think the coast is a blast. Like you go to a game, you get cheap beers. You hopefully get some Pink Whitney. There's always some fights. Like I have no problem saying it. I'd love if our team was a really tough team. Like that's what people enjoy seeing, especially in a market like Greensboro, where I don't think a ton of people there are like really, really knowledgeable about the game. That's not an insult at all, but they want to go and they want to be entertained. And so we'll see how it goes, but I can't wait to get down there and just thinking of them in like a playoff run and being down there in June and seeing the fan base. It would be awesome. It is going to be awesome to be a part of. And I just think it's cool that we get to show up and be like, yeah, I'm one of the owners, even though it's like minority owner.
No, it's still awesome. It really is. Hopefully we can make it down there for a game. That'd be sick.
Yeah.
And I got one more question for you. And I actually I kind of pulled this out of my ass when I asked Shaddy this question, but I kind of love this question. Obviously you've accomplished so much in your playing career and everything, Olympics, Stanley Cup final and all that. Is there one story or one question that you're not really ever asked, but something that you love telling? Because those are the obvious ones, but sometimes there's something that you have that no one would really ever ask you.
Nothing pops into my head right away. I mean, I think like I've been open with like how hard it is at the end, right? And like you don't know what you're gonna do, and so I think like I am proud of myself, and I was very lucky to have like a great family and friends and like be able to kind of get back into the real world. And I was so lucky with Chiclets, but I don't really have anything that I kind of talk about everything. But I think
why
like
people love you. You air it out. Like when do you not air it all out? I mean, I think that's
that's what people want. But I think like looking back, there were some serious times, and like I was lucky enough to have plenty of money, but there's still like a panic. Like, what am I going to do? And to be able to kind of like battle through that, and I think be willing to, like, I went into Spittin Chiclets and starting it, and I was like, oh yeah, like people are going to chirp you. And like, I remember my buddy's like, you're starting a podcast? Like what? and I think just like being confident enough to be willing to maybe get made fun of or put yourself out there a little bit. Like I was kind of willing to like risk, being like self-conscious or worrying about what people are think just to try something new. And I was lucky that everything happened the way it did. But no, I talk about everything, like everything in my career and in my life. I enjoy talking about it. I think fans like hearing about it. When Biz, Keith, and myself just, usually there's 30 minutes at some point in an episode where we're just like talking about our weekends and stuff. Like I like that stuff. And there's obviously things you got to leave out, but nothing really that I've never asked about that I'm dying to talk about, because I would have anyways.
Yeah. Well, look, we appreciate all you do for the game. I said the other day when they put out that top 100 most influential people, I said, like, the fact that you don't have those guys on that list, to me,
was Biz not on it?
Not even on it in 100 names. List? It's the Hockey News, and I said,
"Oh like, yeah, they're the big, they're geeks."
There's no credibility to that when you don't have at least Biz, who's the most important face on television for the game of hockey, and he's on the biggest hockey pot. It's, you know, so that's you guys have really rolled in sort of this new audience for the game. It's been awesome. Last thing I'm going to leave you with, Zach Boychuk is in the chat, and he says he would like a contract next year down in the coast with you guys. And so obviously I go on Hockey DB. 1, 2, 3, 4. He's got 4 championships in the last 7 years, 1 in the Swiss League, 3 in the DEL for Berlin. He's got 29 points in 38 games. I'm pretty sure
that's probably a done deal. That's probably a done deal. It's funny though. People reach out. They're like, hey, you need an equipment manager. Hey, who's the coach? Hey, who's the GM? Like, I'm willing. And I'm like, whoa, this is kind of cool. Like, I don't think we have any say in anything. I'm not positive about that. I would love to maybe have some sort of say in the hockey ops department. But like, if you have Boychuk willing to come down and be on our team, that seems like a no-brainer.
I love that he's.
Are you willing to fight? Are you willing to fight, Zach? I'm just kidding, buddy.
The guy's still putting up numbers. Yeah. I'm looking at his numbers in the DEL. There's a reason he keeps being brought back and his team wins. I mean, so maybe we just got you a guy with 150 games in the National Hockey League for your team next season, Whit. So we're looking out over here at Morning Cup of Hockey.
That could be a possible first signing right there. Yeah. And he's got the Carolina history in his career, correct?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that adds something to it. I think we're cooking with gas now.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Whit. Look, greatly appreciate your time this morning. I'm sure I'll see it again at some point this year, and we'll be able to catch up more.
Yeah, keep crushing it, boys. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for being in our corner. It means a lot. You know, he always is hyping us up. It's cool, like hearing the shout outs that they give us. Chiclets Cup on the show. Really cool having Whit on this morning.
And G's been in the chat taking shots at me about not having Chiclets U at BU and saying the collective needs to step up. I promise you, I have raised that multiple times, and it has been met with resistance, unfortunately. The fact that we haven't done a Chiclets U at BU, it's pretty disappointing. It's really the only thing that I can say. And those Chiclets U videos are awesome. I think Neil wrote in the chat that they should do one with UConn. I totally agree with that.
I've been saying that for a while.
That new building that's sick. It's obviously rich with sports history, with basketball, this and that. So those Chiclets U videos are unbelievable. Those guys have delved into college hockey. G really has the last couple of years, which has just been awesome. And has really helped with the branding, with everything John Butchergross does. So before we get to Bet365, I know you're going to quickly give us our bet of the day. Don't forget to like this episode. We got to be able to tell Whit this was our most liked episode of all time, so we can get him back on here. He's a busy guy, right? So you get him, you got to hold him, and then give him a reason to come back. So give us a like on the episode. Make sure you follow and subscribe to the Daily Faceoffs YouTube page. Really important for us. Contract year 2025 for Johnny Boy and I. And with that, Johnny, why don't you give us our Bet365 and then take us out for the day.
Yeah, I got to get to Ottawa Senators morning skate here, so I got to hustle up and get to the Garden. But tonight's pick, we're going to go against the Carolina Hurricanes and take the Dallas Stars at home. Carolina played a close game last night, probably too close for comfort on the road in Chicago. They ended up pulling it out in overtime, but tonight they had to Dallas to take on the Stars. We're taking the Stars at -130. Money line, the bets have not looked good the last two nights, I guess. Last Thursday, last night was tough. We took Columbus money line last night on Long Island, and that was a tough one. But we're feeling good about the Stars tonight. So take Dallas. That's all I've got for today. A long show today, but a good show today. You might get Pat tomorrow. We'll try to work on that for tomorrow's show. Pat's obviously been buzzing the last couple of games. They had a big win over Vegas on Saturday night. Last night, a tough one against Carolina. But any final thoughts, Colby, before we wrap up today's show?
No. Good job getting Whit. That was good work by you. And now we'll have to follow up. I know we've been talking to Army about getting him to come back on this year. So we'll work on that. Other than that, no, the chat, we didn't necessarily get to you guys quite as much as we usually do, and as usually we like to. We did see you guys kind of going at each other in the chat today, which is always super entertaining to see. You know, I'm looking over at my computer over here trying to keep up with what you guys are starting and going through in the chat. But again, we love how the longer we go, the more people join the show. You know, it always makes us feel good about going an hour and a half. Chef Richard, you're asking me about the hat that I'm wearing. Shoot me a DM. Or DM one of us and we'll point you in the right direction. They're actually really easy to get. They come really quick and they have other really cool merchandise. So just hit us on DM on social media and we'll get you sorted with that. So that's all we got for today. Again, we appreciate all you guys. It's truly humbling to see the audience for this show growing. I mean, our download numbers have been awesome. You know, which is not something we ever really even thought about when we started the show. We thought Twitter, YouTube, live, but the fact that people are downloading, we're grateful. Get the automatic downloads on. That way you never miss one. Not to mention it helps our numbers. So we know you all love Johnny at least. And so, you know, do it for our guy, Johnny. Right. And yes, Doug Wade is asking me, does that say Tel Aviv Hockey Club? It does say Tel Aviv Hockey Club. So, that's all we got for today. As always, we appreciate you rolling with us and we'll see you right back here at 9 a.m. tomorrow.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Seravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.